Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. Recently, someone making a lot of headlines is Paul Bettany, probably because he's been promoting Mordecai. But he's spending more time talking about the Avengers Age of Ultron. And he's really, I think, doing a good job of competing for MVP over at the MCU. Really, he just cannot be saying enough good things about what Kevin Feige is building over there. Now, the first wave of publicity came from Paul Bettany talking about how big the production was and how he'd never been on a set so big. And he said, usually I'm on film sets that can only afford one camera, and the Avengers Age of Ultron not only has multiple cameras, but they have Avengers in helicopters, they have all these different explosions all day, and he just said it's just so awe-inspiring that he said even Samuel L. Jackson, who is not easily surprised, has to be impressed with the kinds of things that they're filming on location, etc. So I thought that was a very nice thing for Paul Bettany to say. And that would have even been enough. But then just the other day, he said even more. And if I were Kevin Feige, I'd be like, Paul, I think this is a little bit obvious of kissing up to me, but I like it. So what did Paul say? Well, Paul said that he's just so thankful to be a part of the Avengers, finally on screen. I mean, he's been the voice of Jarvis since the beginning of the first Iron Man. But he said what's so nice about this is that now, since he's not only making these movies, but he said he'll be involved in the movies going forward, more on that in a moment. But he said it's so wonderful as an actor to finally have the kind of job security where he can make better decisions in other parts of his career, where he no longer has to take films just to make money. And perhaps that was a shot at Mordecai itself, right? A horribly embarrassing film. It debuted at number 9. Big black mark for big black eye, I guess you could say, for Johnny Depp's resume. But I think everyone involved is a little bit embarrassed to be a part of that film. So I think Paul Bettany is saying, you know what? This is embarrassing, but thanks to now being cast as the Vision, this is something that will never have to happen to me again. So I think, Paul Bettany now kind of has to live up to that. He has to start making some really great movies now that he can be a little more choosy. But kudos to him. And I think it's nice when so many other actors are kind of maybe complaining that they don't have enough screen time, or, maybe they don't want to be a part of the MCU because it's too much of a commitment, kind of like what the rumor is why Joaquin Phoenix turned down the gig. Ethan Hawke was saying that too. He's like, well, I didn't get Doctor Strange, but I don't really know if that kind of commitment's for me. Well, for Paul Bettany to come in and to highlight the positive of being part of the MCU, I think is really wonderful. Now, what is this about more vision? Well, Paul Bettany said, this is interesting. He didn't really say he read the comics. I think he kind of sidestepped that, being like, well, for me to prepare for my role of the Vision is that I just watched all the Marvel movies. And he said, not only was it a lot of fun, but I really liked seeing how interconnected they all are and how they really are all part of the same universe. And I think that he's saying there is that he wants to make sure that his interpretation of the Vision fits with that. So that also, of course, begs the question, what's planned for the Vision? Where else is he going to be showing up? Well, of course, he'll probably be showing up in Avengers Infinity War, which is approaching faster than one might think, especially since Joss Whedon's already going around saying, look, I'm not directing that as well. It's too many movies. I need to go and make something myself. But I think he said the same thing about Avengers Age of Ultron. Correct. Let's see if Kevin Feige can come up with the paycheck, or, maybe the Russo brothers will end up being chosen for that. Maybe they're not tired of making these kinds of movies. And I don't think they have quite the same opportunities as Joss Whedon, because they had really kind of no success rate prior to joining Marvel. They made some movies that I'm sure some people enjoyed, but they weren't like a Joss Whedon, who already had a built-in fan base. A small one, but a fan base nonetheless who would like to see more Joss Whedon-y things. I don't think anyone's really clamoring for old-school Russo brothers material. So anyway, Paul Bettany could show up in Avengers Infinity War, a 2-parter, by the way. But he could also show up in Doctor Strange if he chooses to follow around the Scarlet Witch, who I suspect will show up there as well. I mean, we have all of our movies announced for quite some time now coming out of Marvel, and there are no more. We know who all our solo movies are going to go to, and they're largely going to go to new characters: Black Panther, Captain Marvel, Doctor Strange, of course, who we already have cast, Benedict Cumberbatch. But what about all these new characters being introduced? Where's Quicksilver going to show up? Where's Scarlet Witch going to go? Will Ultron come back? what about the Vision? So I suspect a couple of these will be going over to Doctor Strange's movie, and that would be Scarlet Witch, because she is involved in whatever they're going to call magic in the MCU. And then, of course, Vision, in the comics at least, follows around Scarlet Witch. So you could see him there. He could also maybe show up in Civil War, if a lot of characters are going to be a part of that. So he's going to probably be, maybe one of those who's called upon quite frequently. And I think Paul Bettany, with all due respect, and while he says he has been taking a lot of paycheck gigs, he hasn't been taking a lot of gigs, period. Paul Bettany's not an incredibly busy individual. So I think he has the time to not only make these movies, as many Marvel movies, as many cameos as they would like him to, and he certainly seems game to do that, but I think that he has the time to do so, even if he wants to go and make a couple of more highbrow, better quality films outside of the MCU. So that's the first story of the day. I'm very curious to what you think of Paul Bettany. Do you think he's too obviously kissing up to Kevin Feige, or do you think it's nice? And also, what do you think of someone putting a positive spin on being part of such a big enterprise like the MCU? All right, so the second story of the day is going to also be about comic books and comic book movies, and that's San Diego Comic-Con. Now, every couple of years, the contract for the convention and San Diego to be the host city comes up for renewal. And every time, at least for the last couple of renewals, Los Angeles and Anaheim are like, hey, wait a minute, before you re-up with San Diego, why don't you consider coming to one of our cities? And it's an ongoing conversation at this point that a lot of Comic-Con fans have had, so I also wanted to open up the discussion here and see how you guys feel about it. Now there are the pros and cons of San Diego. On the positive side, it's really a Comic-Con town. When a Comic-Con comes to San Diego, that's all anybody talks about. And while San Diego is a lovely city, there's not a lot of competition for people's attention. They're on the coast. There's a wonderful group of restaurants. The Gaslamp District is, very, very charming, and so that provides wonderful entertainment in the evening. And then everyone is just all about San Diego Comic-Con. Now, the negative side is that there is not enough space for all the people who want to just talk about San Diego Comic-Con. There aren't enough hotel rooms. They sell out within I'd say maybe like an hour. And if you're not on the waiting line in the first maybe 10-15 minutes, you're not getting a room. Also, the convention center is small. They've added a couple hotels, and there is really no room to add anything to the convention center. And so there's really a limit on the number of passes that can be sold as well. So the plus side for moving the convention is more space, both in terms of convention center space and hotel space. Now, Los Angeles is not actually that competitive. Now, right now there are 11,000 hotel rooms in walking distance of the convention center, and they're pretty liberal with the walking distance, but you can walk there. So 11,000 hotel rooms in walking distance in San Diego. Right now in Los Angeles, there are only 5,000 near the convention center, but they're building another 2. That would still put them under San Diego. But still, when you're right in Los Angeles, you can have even more movie and television personalities come out to the convention. It's easier to get the talent there. Although they helicopter them down to San Diego, it's not that difficult. And, there's a big payoff, of course. So that's what Los Angeles has. Now, Anaheim, though, has 13,000 hotel rooms available. They already host a lot of conventions. D23 is hosted there, and also the big YouTube convention is held there as well. So they have 13,000 hotel rooms, but the downside here is that of course, you're going to be at the Anaheim Convention Center right next to Disneyland and Disney's California Adventure. And that's a big competitor for people's attention. They could be like, well, I'll spend one day at the convention and then I'm running over to Disneyland. Now, Marvel, though, could maybe really like this if the convention is in their own backyard. Maybe they will stop this current act of distancing themselves from San Diego Comic-Con. For instance, Marvel Phase 3, not announced at Comic-Con, announced during their own press day event at the El Capitan Theater, owned by Disney. So maybe if the convention is right there at Disneyland, they'll be, more encouraged to be part of that event. So that could be a real plus for the convention. Comic-Con International is what it's called. We always call it San Diego Comic-Con, but maybe we'll find ourselves calling it something else. It's now officially called Comic-Con International. So I think this is a really interesting conversation. Also, some people say that if you were to move it to Anaheim or Los Angeles, and because more movie and television personalities could get to the convention, it would move even further away from its original intention, which was to celebrate comic books. Although I do like now that they say it celebrates the popular arts. I think that's wonderful. I think that's more inclusive, and I think it's a little more representative of what the convention has become. And there's nothing wrong with the success that these properties have enjoyed in other mediums, right? And far more success than they've ever had on the page. But I think this is just something that's a natural progression anyway, but on that note, and I think that no matter where the convention is, that ship has sailed. I think comic books are kind of, unfortunately, a little bit of an afterthought, but hey, that's even how the publishers themselves are feeling these days. So if they can't even be bothered to push their comics instead of, as I've been saying, largely turning them into promotional material, and even like the other publishers like Image, I mean, make no mistake about it, a lot of those titles are largely pitches for television shows, and why not? The Walking Dead made Image Comics. Such an influx of cash and prestige. That's why Image is so competitive these days as a comic book publisher, and is actually able to almost be on par with Marvel and DC, all because of a television show, The Walking Dead. Well, then, you know, that's just the way things are. And I think the convention, Comic-Con International, really needs to focus on, at this point, being available to the most number of fans. And you have a situation at this point that's so crowded, and you really have to, you know, be in the know to even navigate the registration and getting in a hotel at this point, that no one can really decide on a whim, hey, I'd like to go to Comic-Con. No one can really decide for the first time. It's intimidating, and it becomes a little bit of a cult insidery thing. So if they have more space and more hotel rooms, you can get even more people there, and I think most importantly, new people. So those are my thoughts, but I'm very curious to hear how you feel about the convention. Have you ever gone to San Diego Comic-Con? Would you go to Comic-Con if it were held? Would you be more likely to go if it were held in Los Angeles or Anaheim? And what do you think of the hotel and space situation? All right, so that's the second story of the day. Now, the third story of the day is that Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie seem to really want to work together. Now, you can't really blame them to some degree, because it was incredibly successful for them the first time with Mr. and Mrs. Smith. That's the film that they first met on. Well, huge controversy over Brad Pitt, to somewhat degree cheating on Jennifer Aniston, and a lot of the publicity was done for that film, showing Jolie and Pitt as a couple. Very, very dark time for Team Aniston, but it all worked out really well for Team Jolie. Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt had a huge success with Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and they have become a huge Hollywood power couple and a tabloid staple. Their box office isn't as consistent, but still, they are definitely a Hollywood power couple, just by the nature of their being together. So they've decided to not only work together on this upcoming film, By the Sea. It's a small film that Jolie wrote and is directing. They recently released a still. It's supposed to have very intense sex scenes, which I think is a little creepy for a couple to kind of make their own sex tapes, I guess, on Universal's dime and then ask us to pay for it. But you know what? We'll see how it goes. But it seems that they want to work together yet again, as Brad Pitt is in talks. A lot of people are making jokes about how can he be in talks for a movie with his wife? Why don't they just talk about it personally and then go to the studio and decide whether or not he wants to do it, right? For her third directorial, or actually fourth directed film, she's already directed In the Land of Blood and Honey, Unbroken, of course, not a big hit for Jolie. It did nicely at the box office, although I'm saying that's still Zamperini, not Jolie, but no awards nominations really for Oscars or for Golden Globes. Certainly not, I think, what she was expecting. But she's not giving up, so you have to kind of give her credit for that. So she has this By the Sea film. That will be her third, much smaller picture. But then she wants to do a sweeping bio of Richard Leakey in a film called Africa. Roger Deakins is going to work with her again, her cinematographer on Unbroken, so I guess he enjoyed the experience. And they want Brad Pitt to play Richard Leakey. Richard Leakey fought against poaching for rhinos and elephants, and I think right away you think Gorillas in the Mist. Very successful film, very well received, starring Sigourney Weaver as Diane Fossey with Gorillas. Fantastic film. If you haven't seen Gorillas in the Mist, I recommend you watch it. And also, Out of Africa is a very successful movie from back in the day, starring Meryl Streep and Robert Redford, and that was just an Oscar bonanza, and a very highly regarded film, very successful film. I actually recommend you watch Out of Africa. I dragged my feet to watch it, only watched it recently. I bought a really nice Blu-ray copy of it, and I have to say, it's a fantastic movie. It's really good, especially if you're enjoying some of the more female-centric movies to come out right now, like Frozen and Maleficent. Out of Africa has a surprisingly strong female protagonist in Streep. But Robert Redford's very good as well. I also think it has a very realistic depiction of certain types of relationships and how men and women react, interact. Hollywood tries to usually, sugarcoat it, but I think that it's a much more complex situation, these kind of, romantic relationships, and I think Out of Africa does a wonderful job exploring it. So I really recommend that you watch that, and Jolie would be lucky to have a film even the fraction of the quality of both Gorillas in the Mist and Out of Africa. So, but, good pedigree, and if she can kind of latch on to those movies, I think that would bode very well for Africa, and of course for Brad Pitt. Now, I don't know why they're focusing so hard and doubling down on working with each other when, hey, they've got World War Z 2 and Maleficent 2 to be making, but we'll see how this works out. I think it's tough for couples to work together, and I think, again, I would have waited to see how By the Sea does, but on paper it sounds like a good project, but I'm just not quite sure. I think it's never a good idea to, continually work with the same people. I think it creates kind of a theater group mentality, and I think audiences get a little tired of it. For instance, Steven Soderbergh, always working with the same people. I think at the end of the day that came around to bite him in the butt. So I'm wondering what you guys think, and if this sounds like a picture you'd be interested in, and if you think Brad Pitt is right to kind of help out his wife's career, or do you think she's helping him, or do you think they're just helping each other, and do you think they can ever recapture the magic of Mr. and Mrs. Smith? By the way, also a very different picture than both By the Sea and what this Africa film would be. All right, so those are the 3 stories of the day. Now, the viewer question is really stumped me, and so I wanted to put it out there for everybody. This is from Zachary Wilson, and Zachary said, you appreciate this character because she doesn't wear her sexuality on her sleeve. I forget which video he wrote this on, so I don't remember exactly who he's referencing, but hold on. So Zachary says, and yet you're a huge Emma Frost fan. I'm not asking this question, Grace, as a criticism. I just really want to know how, as a feminist, you can get behind Emma Frost's portrayal. I'm a feminist too, and whenever people ask me why I support naked Emma Frost or naked Mystique, and yet I'd like to see Wonder Woman wear clothing, I have no idea what to say. What do you say in response to these types of questions? That is a great question, Zach. As I said, a real stumper, and I had to really think about this one. Now, I still agree, Wonder Woman should wear pants. Wonder Woman, there's no reason for Wonder Woman not to wear pants. She is in battle, she'd want to protect herself, and also it's just kind of embarrassing to be in a swimsuit when everybody else is fully clothed. Now, I have no problem with her wearing skin-tight clothing, as her male counterparts do, and I think that really would serve everybody. It would be more realistic in terms of her costume, and it would still have the sexiness that people would like to see in a superhero costume. But here's the thing, Wonder Woman's personality doesn't support showing off, her body. Wonder Woman, and she's not even like an earthy Mother Earth type of character like, let's say, Poison Ivy, who also is known for not often wearing very many clothes. But that's because she wants to be one with nature. She's like a plant lady, Garden of Eden, the whole shebang. But Wonder Woman is a warrior, and that's, I think, why Wonder Woman, so many fans want to see Wonder Woman fully clothed in an armor. She's a warrior, she's supposed to have tremendous self-respect, she's supposed to also be a feminist, so it just doesn't make any sense that she would dress in such a manner. Now, as for Emma Frost and Mystique, well, that's a very different situation. Emma Frost is someone who uses every weapon in her arsenal, including her sexuality. She's a very aggressive individual, and I think you have to consider her backstory. Her history with the Hellfire Club, basically kind of starting out as a stripper, and I think early on, before she gained her diamond form, which made her much more formidable as a physical opponent with her secondary mutant mutation, sexuality was really, I think, important to her gaining power. It was really a big part of what she needed to survive. So I think that's always worked for her, and it's just part of her personality. But I would also like to point out that Emma Frost wasn't particularly popular as a character until she got her Diamond Form second mutation, and she had a more interesting personality developed by Grant Morrison in New X-Men. That's not currently All New X-Men, but in his New X-Men run. That's when the character became likable, not for her sexuality. Actually, that was a bit of a drawback at the time. I've told this story before, but that's the one cover I ever felt embarrassed to purchase, the Frank Quitely Emma Frost in front of that pink background cover. That was the only time I ever felt embarrassed, and I actually wrote Marvel a letter saying, I have to go to the checkout. It's hard for me to put this comic book down and ask to purchase it. But otherwise, I think otherwise, with the exception of that original costume that Frank Quitely drew, she has only been somewhat sexual. I mean, she's pretty, they don't make it too overt. It's not too bad to watch, or to read, I guess you could say. And so again, it's just a part of her personality. She doesn't wear it on her sleeve. She has many other qualities going for her, to the point where I think, if I've been saying recently, I think Rosamund Pike would be a great Emma Frost. If she were to play the character, I don't think she'd need to dress in an equally provocative manner. She could just wear all white, somewhat low-cut dress, and I think that would be enough to get the point across. I think Emma Frost is now so much more than her sexuality, and that's what makes it, I think, okay. As for Mystique, I at first also was like, well, she's naked, but it was a great marketing idea on behalf of Bryan Singer. But I think that the reasoning behind it is what also helps here, and that's that if someone changes their appearance through their mutation, how is she getting rid of her clothing if it's not part of the mutation, right? I mean, she'd have to be constantly just carrying that white dress around in a bag, being like, hold on, I gotta go in this bathroom and change, because even though I can change my skin and create other clothing, this white dress comes off and on, right? It makes no sense. And so I think with her power set, you can only really, when you think of the science of it, it's really the only direction you can go in. And I think also, while that character is basically running around naked, they've never also been overt with that. It's just, it's there, it's something nobody discusses. They don't have, gratuitous shots showing like butt shots and chest shots. They often actually will frame it and have the actress, either being Rebecca Romijn or now Jennifer Lawrence, stand in a way where you don't actually see that much. So it's really implied. So I think that's appreciated by, female audience members who perhaps aren't as interested in a naked Mystique as some other audience members might be. So I think that's why it works with those characters. And I think Harley Quinn is the one area who's in a gray zone, because on the one hand, I think it's disappointing to see her character so sexualized when that wasn't how she started. But I think that they've created this loopy innocence and zaniness about the character. I don't know how innocent, actually. She kills quite a bit these days. But a zaniness about the character that it's just, I think that Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Conner are kind of making it work over in the Harley Quinn title. They're kind of slowly winning me over to that version of the character. But, even in the Arkham games, she has varying states of undress. We'll see how it turns out. But it's definitely a difficult conversation, and I think the key to success, though, is that if a character is going to be, not particularly dressed, I think they have to have other elements to their personality. It can't be the only thing they have going for them to get people's attention. It has to be part of a bigger conversation. And I think the characters that we've just discussed have very forceful personalities. And that's why I think they are still popular with both male and female fans. Gay and straight fans. Recently someone said, don't forget, not everybody is straight who's enjoying these properties, and so I just wanted to acknowledge that as well. But for Wonder Woman, again, it just doesn't fit her personality. It fits these other characters' personalities, but with Wonder Woman, it just seems like she just doesn't wear pants for the sake of not wearing pants. It just, again, it makes sense with the other characters in terms of their personality and their power sets, but it doesn't make sense with Wonder Woman, and that's a huge difference. So, Zach, I hope that helps you decide why you are okay with it, and I'd be very curious to know how other people feel about this, because it's a really interesting question. All right, thank you so much for tuning in. Please write your thoughts down below about today's top 3 stories and the viewer question. Anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.